Hi, I'm Trevor Conquergood. Welcome to this week's RNK Software Club weekly video. So today I'm going to digitize this little whale for you, and we're going to take advantage of some of the cool parts of the software like the Automatic Digitizing, and then we'll kind of assess the results and maybe take some control and make some edits to kind of perfect the design the way that I imagine I want it to be. So what I've got on my screen right now is actually the finished digitizing that I've already prepared and a stitch out that you can kind of get a visualization of what I wanted to make. Okay, so now I'm just going to click on my workspace and I'll start a new design. Right away you might be noticing something new on my desktop. If you haven't, it's right here. There's a new toolbar. I'm not going to talk too much about what's coming up, but I am using one of the testing versions or beta versions of the next version of the Floriani software for FTCU owners. And so you'll learn more about the cool, dynamic, context intelligent toolbar in an upcoming video from me and Kathy Quinn and all the rest of the gang at R&K. But today what we're going to do is simply talk about a whale artwork. So let's get started. I'm just going to click on my backdrop tool for a minute, mainly because I want to bring this picture in and on my desktop, just so you can see that first of all, it's a JPEG, which means it's made up of pixels. And notice that there really aren't any segments, in the sequence box. And what I mean by that is, I can't click on the purple whale and then just come down and click on one of the different styles of embroidery. I'm going to have to, somebody has to make the shapes. It's either me or it's the computer. And I'm just zooming in to show you that if I get really close to this design, and I'm now like 1,493% zoomed in on this, and you can clearly see what it's made of. Dots of colors. All right, so now that you understand that a JPEG is an image that doesn't come with shapes, unlike a vector image, if we had a vector image of the whale, this would be a very different process. Because I would simply click on the little purple spout water pieces and choose an auto satin, but in this case, we're going to go with the auto digitizing steps. So why don't I do this? I'll click on a new design again. And so we're going to use this wizard hat here. This wizard hat is your kind of automation. It gives us automatic results. So it's this tool right here. It's called the Auto Digitizing Wizard. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Auto Digitizing. And Auto Digitizing allows us to select our image. So I'll click on Select Image and browse around my computer. So I usually put things on my desktop so that I'll find them, and then if I either delete them or I put them away afterwards. But so to me, the desktop's like a temporary location that I often use when I'm working. So now that I've selected the whale, and you can see it selected in that little path bar there, I'll just say next, and it shows me the picture. And it tells me its size. Now, you can change the size now if you want. Of course, you can always change it later. The benefit of changing it now is if you do, it allows the auto digitizer to choose stitches based upon the actual sizes of the shape. So sometimes it makes different choices. So in other words, if you were planning on making this bigger or smaller, you could type that in now. Anyway, I'm going to say next. And it gives me the color reduction step. And when I zoomed in on that eye, it sure didn't look like purple and black. There were like all kinds of shades of colors in there. So what this is doing is simplifying them, and you can literally add more shades in or take them out. You can click on a specific color if you want and delete it. But if you give this auto digitizer an actual photograph instead of clip art, you'll see that there may be lots more colors in here that you need to work with. That's why clip art's usually pretty successful when it comes down to this auto digitizing process. Anyway, we'll say next. You can interact with it as long as you want, but when you do, you say next when you're done. And now it brings us to the vectorization step. And when you have the vectorization step, sometimes if the results in here aren't quite what you like, maybe there's a color missing, I always say it kind of helps the software know how strictly to trace those shapes, and it's kind of a less or more situation. There's also an option here to fill in the background. Right now it says it's not going to fill in the background, and it's telling us that it thinks white is the background. If you wanted the software to make shapes for that white, you would check this off to fill it in. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And I have one last question, and that is simply because we told it to digitize, which means we said create the embroidery. What do you want to do for lock stitches and trim? So lock stitches is set for always. Why don't I just set trim to always? And so I know it'll always lock, stitch, and trim kind of every piece of the design, which is kind of the safest way to do it. Sometimes I put only lock stitch if there's a trim, and only trim if the distance is so far. That kind of reduces locks and trims on shapes that I'm not planning on trimming. But I think for most people, always and always is a pretty good setting. Anyway, I'm going to say finish. And so it quickly creates an embroidery design. And it's pretty good. But I've been digitizing for 35 years and I've got lots of opinions. And so the first thing I normally do is just click on my slow redraw, and watch it stitch out. And and you can speed it up or speed it and slow it down with your little sort of tool up here. I'll make it go a little faster. And right away I notice it's like, it does the eye and the mouth and the cheek, and it's putting the body of the whale afterwards. So that's kind of not what I had imagined. I think one of the things that I love to teach about is sort of what makes embroidery successful. And in this case, I'm going to suggest that this purple fill will actually be more smooth and so better if I actually don't have the holes in it. Like, did you notice that the purple fill has to create sort of the shapes to go around the eyes and the mouth? And so what I'm telling you is I prefer to put the sewing sequence so that the eyes and the mouth become later in the design. And you noticed that they were like the first thing that sews. And look over on the right hand side at my sewing sequence, and I can see based on colors and shapes what the sequence is. So there's the eye. That's actually the first thing in the design. Why don't we right click over top of this in the sewing sequence and tell it to move it to be the last thing? That puts it up on top of the body of the whale and makes it a little more prominent. Same thing with this mouth right here. There's the shape for the mouth. I'm going to right click and move that thing to be the last thing that sews. So that's called resequencing your design. You're simply affecting the sewing order that things happen. While we're at it, the little pink cheek, might as well move that to the front too. Looks like pink's the pink cheek and the pink heart. Well, I don't think it matters if the pink cheek and the pink heart sew last either. So now we're going to move those ones to the end. And so now they'll be the final thing that sews. Either way, they're all going to sew after the body of the whale. So now that I've kind of set it up, okay, fine, it can do the yellow first and then the gray flower. But now I want to basically talk about the results of the purple whale color. So because I've put the eye and the mouth on top, I'd really prefer if the fill didn't make those holes. And I think you'll find it interesting. In fact, just to kind of take a look at it, what I'm going to do is select that whale. I'm just going to make a copy of it. And it's going to set it aside. We can take a look at it after I'm done playing with it to see how the results actually affected the stitches. So for example, while we're working on this, I'm just going to hide the eye. See how there's a little eyeball beside the color for the eye? Let's just hide it. Same thing with the mouth. Hide it, and the pink. Hide it. If I want to turn it back on, it's to simply click back on the eyeball, and it's back on again. So there's like a little on-off. That's like don't show or show this particular color. Now that I've done that, I'm going to zoom in over top of the shapes, and maybe I'll even turn off the 3D mode so you can see those holes that I'm talking about. I'd like to eliminate them. So I'm going to click on my select tool and select the whale. And if I want to interact with the shape of my whale, I'm going to need to click on below the select tool, 2 down is the shape tool. So I click on shape, and you'll notice right away that it uncovers all the points that make up my whale. It allows me to find the green starting point where it'll start sewing, and I can move it wherever I want. And the red ending point for where it will finish sewing, and I can move that wherever I want. But I think more importantly, what I wanted to work on was, like, for example, this eye and his cheek. So notice all the points that make up that eye, and if I click on one of them, it becomes selected. And if I right click on top of it, I can choose to delete, first of all, the point, or delete the whole, because that point is technically a whole of the shape. And so if I say delete whole, it's gone. So that's cool. So now you go to do this one, and I click on it, right click on it, and there's delete point, but there's no delete whole. Well, that's because it's not a whole. So I clicked off. Let me just click on it again, go into shape mode, and zoom out a little bit. Can you see what I'm talking about? It's actually not a hole. It's actually part of the outside shape. So I can't use delete hole. No big deal. I can delete the points. If you want, you can click on them, right click, say delete point. Might take a while to delete, all 15 points or however many are there. So what I'm going to show you is that you can left click and drag a box and select all of the points, the digitized points, in one sort of selection. And now I'm just going to click on delete. And you'll notice that the outline of the shape is almost all fixed, except for it's got kind of a little bit of a glitch to it, a little bit of a wow to it. See that right there? Now I'm really close to my design for 2,400%. I mean, you can really look closely when you need to. But what I want to show you is if I click on this point, can you see these little handles here? Well, those are called tangents. And you can click and drag them to move them around to affect the shape of your design. Both of them, in fact, the one on this point and on the one on this point, are what creates this curvature. Now, there's lots of ways to fix it. I can just bring them right back to the point and smooth and flatten it out that way. Or I can right click on the point and tell it to make it a line, which gets rid of any tangents. So when it's a curve like this one is, it's actually a cusp, which means, and I don't want to get too technical today, but smooth means make it curved on both sides. So now it has two handles, one on either side. Cusp means separate the handles so that I can move them independently of each other. And line means no handles, just go smooth from here to there. So there, look what I did. I just completely smoothed that out. Now if I hit enter or apply on my keyboard, no more holes. So that was part of my objective. And we're really almost done with the design and how much I wanted to fuss over it. The last thing I wanted to show, and let's just pop back over to the baby whale design I made. Notice how I have set up the body to have a different stitch direction for the sort of main part of the whale and a different part for the tail. Well, there's different ways that you can accomplish that. And I'm going to teach an interesting way. So there's the one. So I'm going to come back over, click on that whale. And if I wanted to do it while it stitches, I would come under shape mode and I would go into the ability to edit the path. And I would add a dividing line so that I could choose different stitch angles, which we call inclinations. And right now, if I look at the inclinations, there's simply one of them. I can make any inclination I want, but I would like to have more than one inclination. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split it up so that I can have a different one for here and a different one for here. And another way of doing that is to make this a piece of artwork and slice the tail off and then convert it back into stitches. So I'm going to show you that method. There's often more than one way to create something. So this time I'm going to click on a tool that says artwork. Basically, it's going to take all the thread out of the whale and just show us the shape, the vector shape that it's based on. And now that it's a vector shape, notice if I select it and then go to the shape tool, I got different tools here. So instead of having an edit inclinations or create a hole of my fill, I have a slicing tools. And this is like an open slice and a closed slice. This one says object slice. If I use object slice, watch what happens. I'm just going to click on the tool. And I'm zooming in so that I can click on, and it kind of like sticks to the wireframe. See that, my point? So I'll click on right there. And now I can drag it to wherever I want to slice. So I drag it here to the point across. And I click again. And now when I'm done doing that, I right click, because of course always in Floriani, right click means ending. So now that I've sliced it and right clicked it like that, I'm going to go ahead and select back on the main part of the whale. And see how they're like two independent parts now that I can select? So that's cool, because now I can give them different styles of embroidery. So we'll click on this one. Now, I would also like the stitches to turn and not be just one stitch angle. Notice how I've got it kind of going smooth, but then it turns at the end. And if I click on that shape and go into shape mode, see how there's more than one inclination? Well, that's possible. The way to do that, so let's come over to our design, is to choose not a standard fill, but a satin path. And I know it sounds kind of funny, and when I click on satin path, it asks me to give it some more information. So I'll click on it now. And it says, edit the outlines, inclinations, and the entry exit. The outlines are fine, but I need to draw some inclinations, and now I get to draw as many as I want. So like I said, I'm going to kind of keep the whale going sort of flat and smooth through the body, but when it gets to here, I just start to turn it slightly, and by the time it gets to there, I've got it going kind of all the way to the same angle that meets the tail. And then I set it to start wherever you want and end. So I'm going to make it the opposite. Let it start over here. Oh, now I'm drawing inclinations here. I'm not going to get that inclination. So what I'll do is I've kind of got myself in a tight spot here. So I'll just pull it like that. Well, obviously I don't want that one. So I'm going to right click and delete it. I can't right click and delete it. So I guess I have to pull it over here, and then I can right click and delete it later if I want to, because it still wants me to add them is what it is. But if you get, so here, let's move this out. That's what I can do. All right, I'm deciding what to do about the extra inclination that I made. Just make sure that it's not, and I just wanted to move the green point over there, make sure that it's not right going at the wrong angle. That's all I was sort of getting at. I'll have to figure that out. How can I delete them while I'm going? I know that if you right click, you're going to stop drawing these. So I wanted to set the inclinations, the start and the end. And so can you see why I wanted to finish sewing there and start here? Because it'll sew smoothly across the body and it'll finish at the end, leading me into the tail. Anyway, we're going to right click and it's done. Now, the only thing is I made a satin path, and you're probably thinking, Trevor, why would you make a satin path for a piece that's that big? It's going to look like that. It's kind of got like a split to it. It's not very smooth looking. So what I'm saying is, once I select this, I can always come over to the properties box and interact with it. It's currently set as a satin fill, and that satin fill has the ability to do a random split is how it's currently set. I'm going to come back to the tab for fill and just simply change the pattern from a satin to a pattern fill, and that'll kind of smooth it out for me. See that? But yet it's nice and smooth, and it turns and it meets the tail. So now we got to do the tail. Click on the tail, and I'll go ahead and click on the same satin stitch, and I'll give it one inclination kind of going here and one inclination going there, and then I'll move the green start point. So I had to right click to do that. Now I can move the green start point over to here and the red ending point over to there. Yeah, so when you use that satin tool, it's first click to turn it on, then you draw inclinations as many as you want. You right click, then you move the green and red, the starting point. Oh, I need to put the starting point down here, Trevor. You can't digitize and record at the same time, apparently, because you're not thinking straight. You obviously wanted to make the green start point sit there so it lines up with the red exit point from the previous one to avoid a jump. Anyway, it's right click to finish making and working on the shape. And so now, again, just to keep it kind of smooth and consistent, I'm going to take that shape and convert it into be a pattern fill. And so it looks like that. Okay, so now before I do anything else, I want to point out that this little whale over here, if I select it, down at the bottom, it tells me our design has 12 segments. There's 12 pieces that make up this design. And I have one of them selected, and that segment has 4,095 stitches. Now I'm going to click and drag a box to select the whale's body and tail. And I have those two segments. So now I've selected two segments of my design, and those two segments have 3,600 stitches. So isn't that interesting that I actually took out two little bits of holes in this design, and it's like, I don't know, more than 500 stitches less. So that's why I love to teach about the real fundamentals of creating embroidery designs like layering, which means it's completely fine to put the eye, remember the eye, I'll just turn it back on here so we can see it, the mouth and the cheek up on top. And before I was done with this, I probably would have come up to the top and evaluated the little swirls and the little flower up here. They're all pretty small. If I use my ruler and measure, across these shapes, it says it's 0.24 of an inch. If I want to know what that is in metric, I'll just switch over to metric, and now I can measure it in millimeters. It's 5 millimeters, and to me, that's satin stitch distance, right? I like to satin stitch my 0.2 of an inch shapes. So I'm clicking on it, and it's a pattern fill. Well, you can go backwards. It's one way or the other. I can make them satin fills just as easily as I can make them a standard fill or a satin fill. So what I'm saying is I'm going to change the pattern. And I'm going to do them all at the same time. So here, I'll hold Control on my keyboard, and I'll click on that one, and I'll click on that one, click on that one, click on that one, and then click on this, and then click on satin, and then click on Apply. Now, it's pretty awesome. And I think I could be happy with it, but I am really a little bit fussy at times, and I'm not sure that the flower turns me on. It just doesn't quite have the dimension that I want for a little flower. And I just want to point out that I don't have to use the flower that the software made. And once you learn to use the tools to make your own shapes, it would be easy to take and even just use the artwork tool and draw a shape. So I'll click on there's different ways to make a shape, and I'm going to use the line tool. Basically, I'm just going to go like this. I'll start right here, kind of in the middle. And I'm going to click out and draw like one of these flower petals myself. And I'm going to hold down Control on my keyboard so that my points kind of curve a little bit. Can you see that? And I'm just imagining what a little flower petal could look like. And then I right-click to stop drawing it. Can you see what I drew? Is it bold enough? Here, I'll show you what's cool about the context-sensitive toolbar. I'll click on Select. It selects it. Now the tools in the context toolbar have changed to relate to what I've selected, which is a piece of artwork, and I can quickly make the pen width thicker so that you can see, well, that's too thick, Trevor. How about that? There, you can see what I drew. Now I'm just going to show you, all I have to do with what I drew was click on the satin tool and give it a stitch direction like this, make it start in the middle and stop in the middle, and right click. There you go. Now I'm going to take this shape, use my tools of my toolbar like the circle template tool. Well, they're really far apart, and I can fuss over that by changing the scale or this offset angle or the width of my circle dimensions. And maybe it's just going to be a lot of fun to play around with it and kind of move it. So first of all, I can notice that the angles probably need to be changed. What it's probably going to work out is if I just turn those around until they kind of face, they're kind of small right now. Maybe I should make their circle smaller, let's make it smaller, and bring them closer together. So as that number becomes smaller and I hit Apply, they're going to get, I guess, verbally or no, I don't know, closer together. Circle dimensions. See how they're coming in now. There. So we're getting closer to what I want. Now, I don't know if I want that many petals. I think it was only 5, wasn't it? And I need to play with the angle. So what I'm telling you is you kind of play with these numbers until it starts to look like the flower petal that you had, the little flower that I had in mind. So I can just play with the angle. And anyway, do it as you like. But once you get kind of like that, you make your little flower. So now I've got something that I think is much more, I guess, attractive than the little gray one that was over there. And I'm just going to select that color. And, is it the whole color? So it's the end of the design. So let's not select the whole color because that's going to be the cheek and everything else. So I can expand that color and look at all the pieces of it. And it's really just these ones at the end here that I want to select. And then sort of like click and drag to place them right where I want them in my design. Okay, we're really almost done now. All I need to do is maybe get rid of that original gray flower, which is up here. I'll just click on the color and click delete. So that's a quick video, maybe longer than I wanted it to be, but it takes time when you're going to try and explain what you're doing and not just do it. If I was just digitizing, I'd probably have that thing done in 2 or 3 minutes. But that gives you guys the thought process of how to take a design and use the automatic digitizing tool and then take some of the control back and fine tune the results to get really what turns out to be a pretty awesome design and really cute little whale. So I hope you enjoyed this week's R&K software video of the week. Until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye.